Maya Clark sat alone in the corner of the research lab, staring at the strange metal object on her desk. The artifact was about the size of a coffee cup, covered in swirling patterns that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. She had been studying it for 3 months, and every day she became more certain that it was not just a piece of old alien junk. "Still playing with your space toy, Maya?" Greg Morrison's voice cut through the quiet lab like a knife. He walked over with his usual smirk, followed by Lisa Adams and Kevin Walsh. Danny Cooper brought up the rear, already laughing at whatever joke Greg was about to make. Maya looked up at them, but said nothing. She had learned that fighting back only made things worse. Greg was the head of their department, and he had made her life hell since the day she arrived at Nexus Corporation 6 months ago. "I heard you think that thing is some kind of communication device," Lisa said, rolling her eyes. "What's next? Are you going to tell us it's a phone for calling little green men?" The group laughed, and Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame. Had shared her theory with Dr. Alan Brooks, her supervisor, thinking he would take her seriously. Instead, he had told Greg, who now used it to mock her every chance he got. "Maya thinks she's going to win a Nobel Prize for playing with alien." "Garbage," Kevin added. "Maybe she should stick to making coffee instead of making up stories." Maya's hands clenched into fists under the table. She had 2 advanced degrees and had graduated at the top of her class. Her research was careful and thorough, but none of that mattered here. Greg and his friends had decided she was an easy target, and Dr. Brooks was too weak to stop them. "Leave me alone," Maya said quietly. "I'm trying to work." "Work," Greg laughed. "You call this work?" "Maya, you're supposed to be cataloging these artifacts, not writing science fiction about them. The company pays you to sort them and take pictures, not to waste time on crazy theories." Maya wanted to tell him that the patterns on the artifacts were too complex to be random. She wanted to explain how they seemed to respond to certain frequencies and how she had detected faint energy readings that suggested they were still active. But she knew they wouldn't listen. They never listened. "Dr. Brooks wants to see you in his office," Danny said with a grin. He looked pretty mad. "I think someone's in trouble." A's heart sank. She saved her work and walked slowly to Dr. Brooks' office, feeling their eyes on her back. Through the glass door, she could see Dr. Brooks sitting behind his desk looking uncomfortable. Greg was already there, standing with his arms crossed. "Maya, please sit down," Dr. Brooks said when she entered. Wouldn't meet her eyes. "Greg has brought some concerns to my attention about your work methods." "What concerns?" Maya asked, though she already knew this was going to be bad. Greg stepped forward. "You've been spending too much time on personal projects instead of doing your assigned work. The artifact catalog is behind schedule, and you've been using company equipment for unauthorized experiments." "That's not true," Maya said. "I finished my assigned work every day. The experiments I'm doing are part of understanding what these artifacts actually are." "Understanding?" Greg shook his head. "Maya, these are museum pieces. Dead objects from a dead civilization. And your job is to document them, not to pretend they're magic." Dr. Brooks shifted in his chair. "Maya, I've reviewed your recent reports, and I have to agree with Greg. Your theories about these artifacts being active communication devices are, well, they're not scientific. They're more like wishful thinking." Maya felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "Dr. Brooks, if you would just look at my data." "I've seen your data," Greg interrupted. "Random energy spikes and pattern analysis that proves nothing. You're seeing what you want to see, not what's actually there." "Furthermore," Dr. Brooks continued, "there have been reports of you accessing files that weren't assigned to you, company property that you shouldn't have been looking at." "What files?" Maya asked, confused. Greg pulled out a tablet and showed her the screen. "These files, Maya, classified research data from other departments. Data that you copied to your personal drive last week." Maya stared at the screen in shock. The files were listed there, but she had never seen them before. "I didn't copy these files. I don't even know what they are." "The computer logs show your access codes," Greg said smoothly. "Are you saying someone else used your account?" "I know, but ... Maya realized she was trapped. Someone had used her codes to access those files, but she couldn't prove it wasn't her. "This is a setup. You're trying to frame me," Dr. Brooks held up his hand. "Maya, That's a serious accusation. You have any proof that someone else accessed these files? Maya looked between the two men and realized she had no proof of anything. Greg had planned this perfectly. No, she said quietly. Then I'm afraid we have no choice but to suspend you pending a full investigation, Dr. Brooks said. You'll need to clean out your desk and surrender your access cards. Maya felt numb as she walked back to her desk. Greg and his friends watched. Her pack, her few personal items with satisfied smiles. None of the other researchers looked at her. They all knew what was happening, but no one was willing to help, as Maya carried her box to the door. She turned back one last time to look at the artifacts. They sat on their shelves, mysterious and silent. She was certain they held secrets that could change everything. But no one would ever believe her now. 3 days later, Maya sat in her small apartment, staring at the newsfeed on her computer. The headline made her heart race. First contact. Alien coalition reaches out to humanity. The report showed images of the same type of artifacts Maya had been studying. Scientists around the world were calling them communication devices from something called the Kepler Alliance. The aliens were asking for human volunteers to join them in a war against a hostile species called the Vanguard Empire. Maya stared at the screen and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She had been right all along. The artifacts were communication devices. They were active. They were important. And Greg Morrison had destroyed her career to cover up his own ignorance. But now there was another path opening up. The Colonial Defense Corps was accepting volunteers for the alien campaign. They needed people who understood xenobiology and quantum mechanics. They needed people who had worked with the alien artifacts. They needed people like Maya Clark. She looked at the recruitment website and saw her chance for a new life. A life where her knowledge would be valued instead of mocked. A life where she could prove what she was really capable of. Maya began filling out the application, and for the first time in months, she smiled. Maya stepped off the transport ship onto the red sand of Pyros Prime, her new combat armor feeling heavy and unfamiliar. The planet's twin suns beat down on the landing zone where human soldiers worked alongside creatures she had only seen in training videos. The tall, scaled saurians moved with deadly grace, their yellow eyes constantly scanning for threats. The ethereal luminari floated just above the ground, their bodies glowing with soft blue light. The Insectoid Hive Collective. Members clicked and chittered as they organized supply crates with perfect efficiency. 6 months had passed since Maya joined the Colonial Defense Corps. Basic training had been the hardest thing she had ever done. But her background in xenobiology gave her an advantage that other human recruits lacked. While they struggled to understand alien customs and communication methods, Maya absorbed everything like a sponge. Clark over here called Sergeant Martinez, a veteran of the early contact missions. Meet your squad. Maya joined the mixed group of humans and aliens who would be her team for the next operation. There was Private Johnson, a young man from Earth who still jumped every time a Saurian spoke. Corporal Williams, a tough woman from the Mars colonies, who had quickly earned the respect of their alien allies. And most importantly, there was Keth, a Saurian warrior who had requested to work with human forces. Human Maya, Keth said in his deep, rumbling voice. The Saurians always use both species and personal names when speaking. I have heard good things about your learning speed. Maya felt a flush of pride. In training, she had been the first human to master basic Saurian combat techniques. Their fighting style used their natural balance and strength in ways that humans could adapt with practice. More importantly, she had learned to speak their language well enough to coordinate battle tactics. Thank you, Warrior Keth, Maya replied. In Saurian, making the slight bow that showed respect between equals, the first mission was supposed to be simple reconnaissance. They were to scout a Vanguard outpost in the volcanic mountains and report back on enemy numbers. Maya had studied everything available about the Vanguard Empire, an aggressive species that conquered other worlds for resources and slave labor. They were brutal, efficient, and they had been winning the war until humanity joined the Alliance. The squad moved through the rocky terrain as the suns began to set. Maya found herself naturally falling into the Saurian pace, her movements becoming more fluid and controlled. She carried both human and Saurian equipment, having learned that mixing technologies often gave better results than using only one type. "Contact ahead," Williams whispered into her radio. "Looks like more than just an outpost." Through her scope, Maya could see the Vanguard base sprawling across a crater floor. There were too many ships, too many soldiers. This wasn't a small outpost. It was a major staging area for an attack on the Alliance forces. "We need to report this immediately," Johnson said, his voice tight with fear. But before they could move, energy blasts lit up the rocks around them. The Vanguard had spotted them first. Maya dove for cover as alien weapons carved glowing holes in the stone near her head. "We're surrounded," Martinez shouted. "They're coming from all sides." Maya's mind raced as she analyzed the situation. The enemy had them trapped in a circle of rocks with no way out. Standard human tactics called for finding cover and calling for backup, but backup was hours away. Standard Saurian tactics focused on direct assault. They were badly outnumbered. Then Maya remembered something from her xenobiology studies. The Vanguard were pack hunters, but they relied on fear and overwhelming force. They expected their enemies to panic and make mistakes. "Keth," Maya called out in Saurian, "can your people create a false retreat to the North Ridge?" The big warrior's eyes gleamed with understanding. "Yes, human Maya. The pack hunters will follow, thinking we run in fear." "Williams, Johnson, when they follow Keth, we hit them from behind with everything we have. Martinez, get ready to call in air support for the exact moment they're caught in the open." For a second, Maya realized she was giving orders to people who outranked her, but none of them argued. In combat, good ideas mattered more than rank. The plan worked perfectly. Keth and two other Saurians made a show of retreating, roaring in what sounded like panic. The Vanguard forces rushed after them, exposing their flanks. Maya and the humans hit them with grenades and focused fire just as Luminari fighters screamed overhead, their energy weapons turning the crater into a light show of destruction. When the smoke cleared, the Vanguard staging area was gone. Maya had helped plan and execute a victory that saved thousands of Alliance lives. "Standing work," Clark Martinez said afterwards. "I'm recommending you for advanced tactical training." That was the beginning of Maya's reputation. Over the next 2 years, she became known as the human who could think like an alien. She learned to pilot Luminari phase fighters, their controls, responding to thought and emotion rather than just physical input. She mastered Hive collective coordination techniques, becoming able to manage multiple objectives simultaneously. But the real test came during the siege of Arcturus Station. Maya had been promoted to lieutenant and was serving as tactical coordinator. For a mixed battalion, when the Vanguard fleet arrived, the enemy came in overwhelming numbers, their black ships blocking out the stars. The first wave of attacks killed most of the senior officers, leaving Maya as the highest-ranking person capable of commanding the mixed forces. "All units, this is Lieutenant Clark." She broadcast on all frequencies, speaking in human, Saurian, Luminari, and Hive collective languages. "We are going to hold this station." For 6 days, Maya coordinated the defense. She used human guerrilla tactics to set up ambushes in the station's corridors. She combined them with Luminari stealth technology to make small groups of defenders seem like larger forces. She integrated Saurian heavy weapons with Hive collective swarm attacks to maximize damage while minimizing losses. The key breakthrough came when Maya realized that the Vanguard were using predictable attack patterns. They relied on their technology and numbers, but they didn't adapt well to unexpected tactics. Maya began mixing strategies in ways that confused the enemy computers and frustrated their commanders. On the 4th day, she led a combined strike, teamed deep into the enemy formation, using a captured Vanguard ship equipped with Luminari stealth systems and crewed by Saurian warriors. They destroyed the enemy command vessel. The psychological impact on the Vanguard forces was immediate. They had never seen their enemies work together so effectively. By the 6th day, the Vanguard retreat began. Maya had not just held the station, she had broken an enemy force 3 times larger than her own. The victory celebration was unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. Humans, Saurians, Luminari, and Hive Collective members all honored her, in their own ways. She received the Star of Valor, the highest military decoration in the Colonial Defense Corps. More importantly, she had earned something that Greg Morrison and his friends had never given her: real respect based on real achievement. As Maya stood looking out at the stars from the station's observation deck, she thought about her old life. The woman who had been bullied and humiliated at Nexus Corporation felt like a different person. War had changed her, but not in the way she had expected. It had shown her what she was truly capable of when people believed in her abilities instead of tearing them down. She was no longer just Maya Clark, failed researcher. She was Lieutenant Maya Clark, the human who had learned to bridge the gap between species and turn that knowledge into victory. And she was just getting started. Maya walked through the familiar corridors of Luna Base, her military dress uniform crisp and her colonel's insignia gleaming under the artificial lights. 3 years had passed since she left this place as a disgraced researcher. Now she was returning as part of a diplomatic mission to establish the Human Kepler Alliance Research Institute. The war was over. Humanity and their alien allies had won, but Maya carried the weight of that victory in her steady gaze and measured movements. Everything looked the same, but Maya knew she was completely different. The timid woman who had packed her few belongings into a cardboard box was gone. In her place walked someone who had coordinated battles across multiple star systems, who spoke 4 alien languages fluently, and who had earned the respect of species that most humans had never even met. "Colonel Clark, welcome back," said Dr. Patricia Hayes, the new director of Luna Base. Dr. Brooks had been transferred to a smaller facility on Mars after several personnel complaints. "We're honored to have you here for the Institute setup."
Maya
nodded politely. "Thank you, Director Hayes. I'm looking forward to working with your team." As they walked toward the main research lab, Maya noticed familiar faces. Greg Morrison was there, still wearing his smug expression as he talked to a group of junior researchers. Lisa Adams sat at a workstation, typing something on her computer. Kevin Walsh and Danny Cooper were examining artifacts in the corner, the same type of artifacts that Maya had been studying when they destroyed her career. None of them had noticed her yet. Maya took a moment to observe them, seeing them now with eyes that had watched civilizations rise and fall, that had seen real leadership under pressure, that had witnessed true courage and sacrifice. They looked smaller somehow, like children, playing at being important. "The Xenobiology department is just ahead," Director Hayes said. "I believe you'll recognize some of the staff." Greg looked up as they approached, and Maya watched his face change from boredom to confusion to something that might have been fear. He had aged badly in the 3 years since she left. His hair was thinner, his face softer, and there was a nervous energy about him that hadn't been there before. "Maya," he said, his voice uncertain. Colonel, what are you doing here?" I studied him for a moment before responding. During the war, she had faced down Vanguard commanders who could kill with a thought, had negotiated with Hive. Collective queens who controlled millions of minds, had earned the trust of Saurian war chiefs who had lived for centuries. Greg Morrison, with his petty cruelties and small-minded ambitions, seemed almost pathetic by comparison. "I'm here to establish the new research institute," Maya said calmly. "I'll be overseeing joint human-alien research projects." Lisa Adams had stopped typing and was staring at Maya with her mouth slightly open. Kevin and Danny had moved closer, drawn by the conversation like moths to a flame. They all looked at Maya's uniform, at the ribbons and decorations that marked her service, at the quiet confidence that radiated from her like heat from a star. "You're in the military now?" Lisa asked, trying to sound casual but failing to hide her surprise. "I was in the military," Maya corrected. "I served with the Colonial Defense Corps during the Vanguard War. Now I'm transitioning to diplomatic and research roles." Greg found his voice again, and with it, some of his old arrogance. "Well, that's ... interesting. But Maya, you do realize that military experience doesn't necessarily translate to serious scientific research. This facility handles very advanced work." Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. It was the same feeling she had experienced before major battles, when she knew violence was coming and there was no way to avoid it. But this wasn't violence. This was something else entirely. It's advanced work, Maya repeated. Like the artifact research I was doing 3 years ago. The research that you said was impossible. Greg's face reddened slightly. Maya, that was different. Those artifacts were inactive museum pieces. We had no way of knowing. We had every way of knowing, Maya interrupted, her voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made everyone in the area stop what they were doing. I told you they were communication devices. I showed you the energy readings, documented the pattern responses. You chose to ignore the evidence because it came from someone you considered beneath you. The lab had gone quiet. Other researchers were pretending to work while obviously listening to every word. Maya noticed that some of them were looking at Greg with expressions that suggested this wasn't the first time his judgment had been questioned. Now wait just a minute, Greg said, his voice rising. You can't come in here after 3 years and act like you were some kind of visionary. The military may have given you some fancy titles, but this is real science, not playing soldier with aliens. Maya looked at him for a long moment, and in that silence, she made a decision. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small device that looked very much like the artifacts they'd been studying years ago. She placed it on the nearest workbench and activated it with a touch. The device hummed to life, surface patterns swirling and glowing. Then it projected a 3-dimensional image of a star map, showing the current positions of Alliance fleets across known space. Voices spoke from the device in multiple alien languages, giving status reports from worlds dozens of light years away. This is a standard Kepler Alliance communication array, Maya said quietly. It connects to a network that spans half the galaxy. I carry one because I coordinate with alien research teams on 7 different worlds. The museum pieces you were studying 3 years ago were early models of this technology, sent by the Kepler Alliance to identify species that might be ready for contact. She touched the device again, and the display changed to show research data from the new Institute projects. I'm not playing soldier with aliens, Greg. I'm working with them to advance our understanding of physics, biology, and engineering in ways that will benefit all species in the Alliance. Greg stared at the device, his face pale. Lisa, Kevin, and Danny looked like they had been slapped. The other researchers in the lab had stopped even pretending to work and were openly staring at the holographic display. The Human Kepler Alliance Research Institute will be the most advanced scientific facility in human space, Maya continued. We'll be working on projects that will reshape our understanding of the universe. Faster than light communication, quantum consciousness transfer, bioengineering techniques that can extend human life by centuries. The kind of research that was impossible when this facility was focused on small-minded politics instead of actual discovery. She deactivated the device and put it back in her pocket. Director Hayes, I'd like to begin the transition meetings this afternoon. We have a lot of work to do. As Maya walked away, she could hear the whispered conversations starting behind her. Greg's voice, trying to regain control. Ow, Lisa's nervous laughter. Ow. The excited chatter of researchers who had just seen technology beyond their wildest dreams. Maya didn't look back. She had learned during the war that true power wasn't about dominating others or proving them wrong. It was about moving forward with purpose while leaving the past behind. Greg Morrison and his friends were part of her past now, and she had much more important things to focus on than their small minds and smaller ambitions. 2 weeks had passed since Maya's return to Luna Base, and the transformation was already beginning. New equipment arrived daily from Alliance worlds. Saurian engineers worked alongside human technicians to install quantum computers that operated using crystalline matrices. Luminar scientists floated through the corridors, their soft blue glow mixing with the harsh artificial lighting. Hive Collective specialists organized data streams with an efficiency that amazed even the most experienced human researchers. Maya stood in the main conference room, preparing for the formal announcement of her appointment as director of the Human Kepler Alliance Research Institute. Through the large windows, she could see Earth hanging in space like a blue marble, beautiful and peaceful. It was hard to believe that just months ago, this same view had been filled with the wreckage of Vanguard. Warships, the conference room filled with staff members from across Luna Base. Maya recognized most of the faces from her previous time here. Though many looked nervous and uncertain about the changes happening around them, Director Hayes sat at the front table, along with several officials from Earth and representatives from the Alien Alliance. Greg Morrison entered the room with his usual group of followers, but something was different about them. Over the past 2 weeks, they had watched Maya work with beings from across the galaxy. They had seen technology that made their previous research look like children's toys. Most importantly, they had begun to understand that the universe was much larger and more complex than their small corner of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Director Hayes began, "we're here today to officially announce the establishment of the Human Kepler Alliance Research Institute and to confirm Colonel Maya Clark as its first director." Maya stepped forward, her movements calm and controlled. She had addressed crowds of thousands during the war, coordinating with military leaders from multiple species. This room of a few dozen people seemed small by comparison. "Thank you, Director Hayes," Maya said. "Before we begin the formal ceremony, I'd like to address some concerns that have been raised about this appointment." Greg Morrison straightened in his chair. Over the past few days, he had been gathering support from some of the older researchers, arguing that Maya was unqualified for such an important position. He had questioned her scientific credentials, suggested that her military service was irrelevant to research work, and implied that she was being given the job only because of political connections. "Dr. Morrison has raised questions about my qualifications," Maya continued, looking directly at Greg. "He has suggested that military experience doesn't prepare someone for scientific leadership. I think it's important to address these concerns directly." Greg's face flushed, but he stood up anyway. "Colonel Clark, I have nothing personal against you, but this is one of humanity's most important research facilities. The director should be someone with extensive experience in civilian scientific research, not someone who spent 3 years playing war games." Maya nodded slowly. "You're right, that experience matters, Dr. Morrison. So let me share some of my recent experience." She activated the wall display, and the room filled with holographic images of alien worlds. "During my service with the Colonial Defense Corps, I worked with research teams from 4 different alien civilizations. I helped develop new technologies that combine human innovation with alien knowledge." The display showed images of Maya working alongside Saurian engineers, discussing quantum mechanics with luminary physicists, and coordinating biological research with Hive Collective specialists. In every image, it was clear that she was not just a participant, but a leader, someone the aliens respected and listened to. "I participated in the development of faster-than-light communication arrays," Maya continued, "helped design new materials that are stronger than anything previously known. I worked on biological enhancement techniques that can extend human life and improve our resistance to disease." Greg's supporters were looking uncomfortable now. This wasn't the simple military service they had imagined. This was advanced scientific research at a level they had never seen. "But more importantly," Maya said, "I learned something that I think this facility has been missing. I learned what it means to work as part of a team where everyone's contributions are valued, where good ideas matter more than politics, and where the goal is discovery rather than personal advancement." She changed the display to show the current research projects planned for the Institute. The list was staggering: quantum consciousness studies, dimensional engineering, biological immortality research, and technologies that could reshape human civilization. "These projects require cooperation between human and alien researchers," Maya explained. "They require someone who can communicate with multiple species, someone who understands how different forms of intelligence approach problems, and someone who has proven they can coordinate complex operations under pressure." Greg was looking pale now, but he wasn't ready to give up. "Colonel, I respect your service, but running a research facility requires specific skills. Do you have experience managing budgets? Do you understand the peer review process? Have you ever published in major scientific journals?" Maya smiled, and there was something in that smile that reminded everyone in the room that she had faced down alien warlords and emerged victorious. "Dr. Morrison, during the war, I managed resources for a mixed-species battalion of 12,000 soldiers. I coordinated supply chains that stretched across multiple star systems, I published joint research papers with alien scientists that have been distributed throughout the Kepler Alliance. She paused, letting that sink in. What? But you raise an interesting point about qualifications. Let me ask you something. 3 years ago, when I was studying the Kepler Alliance artifacts, what did you tell me about my research? Greg shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That was different. Didn't have the context. You told me I was wasting time on impossible theories, Maya said. You told me the artifacts were dead museum pieces. You had me suspended for supposedly stealing files that I never touched. You convinced Dr. Brooks that my work was worthless science fiction. The room was completely silent. Now, everyone knew the story, but hearing it laid out so clearly made Greg's past behavior seem even worse. The problem wasn't that you lacked context, Dr. Morrison. The problem was that you were more interested in protecting your position than in pursuing truth. You were more concerned with maintaining control than with advancing knowledge. Maya looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. The Human Kepler Alliance Research Institute will not operate that way. We will pursue knowledge wherever it leads us. We will value good ideas regardless of where they come from. We will treat our alien partners as equals and learn from their perspective. The formal ceremony continued, but the real moment had already passed. Greg Morrison and his supporters said nothing more. They sat in their chairs, no longer the powerful figures they had imagined themselves to be, but small players in a much larger game. After the ceremony, Maya watched as people approached the alien representatives with genuine curiosity instead of fear. She saw human researchers asking Saurian engineers about their construction techniques. She observed luminary scientists sharing meditation practices that enhanced mental focus. She noticed hive collective specialists teaching coordination methods that could revolutionize human teamwork. Greg Morrison left early, followed by Lisa Adams and the others. They walked past Maya without speaking, their silence complete. Final, they had not been defeated by force or intimidation. They had been rendered irrelevant by progress itself, left behind by a universe that had grown beyond their narrow understanding. Maya stood at the window again, looking out at Earth and the stars beyond. The bullies had gone silent not because they feared her, but because they finally understood how small their world had always been. She had returned from war not as a conqueror, but as a bridge to something greater than any of them had ever imagined possible. The silence was not submission. It was recognition that Maya Clark had become something they could never understand or compete with, a citizen of the galaxy. Carrying the wisdom of multiple worlds and the unshakable confidence of someone who had helped reshape the universe itself,